What time are we? We've got another minute or two on my clock here. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining tonight. We'll get started in just a moment. Alrighty. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another inner hour tonight. I sure appreciate it. Just give yourself a moment here with me as I light my candle to actually or symbolically light yours, and give yourself a little breather here for the next hour from the world and all the things the world wants from you, demands from you, pushes on you, expects of you, delights you with, troubles you with. But for the next hour, give the world a break. Give yourself a break from it, and let's just rest in that abiding spirit among us and within us. And Shabbat Shalom, a piece of Shabbat to those of you practicing Shabbat this evening and or tomorrow. Quick little mini announcement that many, if not all of you, may know already, but just a reminder, Passover starts next week on Monday, and commemorates the time when Moses led the Hebrew people from over 400 years of enslavement in Egypt into the freedom of the wilderness for the first 40 years, and then eventually to the freedom of the land of Canaan. That was so-called the Promised Land back there, which eventually became the settlement, which eventually became the Israeli and people, and then the Jewish people after the teachings of Moses came forward, and then eventually the nation of Israel, and so on. So it commemorates that freedom. And I think you all know the story, but in case you don't, the reason it's called Passover in English is because of the so-called 10 plagues, the various times that Moses went to Pharaoh and asked to release his people, and Pharaoh agreed and then recanted or rescinded that and wouldn't let them leave. And then these various increasingly kind of awful things happened to the Egyptians that we now call the 10 plagues. The 10th one of which was the death of the firstborn throughout the nation of Egypt, and the Hebrew people, and anyone else actually, because at that time they weren't Jewish, and at that time there were a mixture of peoples there, mostly what we think of as Hebrews, and all of them who followed the instructions of Moses and put the blood of a sacrificed lamb in a particular ritualistic way over the threshold of their door, their tent, the angel of death passed them over and did not take the life of their firstborn, but did throughout the land of Egypt, including Pharaoh's firstborn. So a horrific time. and Passover commemorates being spared from that. The Hebrew, which is a language, was also a word used early on to describe these peoples. And most scholars that I'm aware of believe that the etymology of that Hebrew came from Ivrit, which is the Hebrew word for Hebrew, basically. And it means one who crosses over, and the idea was one who crossed over the river. They crossed from one side of the river to the other in their journey into the Promised Land. So anyway, a little bit of historical background, but the main point is Passover is coming up this week, and if you've never participated in one and have one you can attend with some Jewish friends or a synagogue, it's a fascinating experience. It's a long evening, almost always. It's also one you can just study about and read and look at the spiritual import of it, because this again is one of those times where there's a lot of energy for liberation, a lot of energy for freedom, which includes us. Part of the instruction of Passover observance is to consider it as if it applies to us each year. Not that we're just remembering an historical event, but that we're recreating that in our lives by having the intentionality and taking whatever actions we can to free ourselves from those things that oppress us, whether it's externally imposed or more likely these days, internally created with our negative attitudes, reactive patterns, emotional situations, whatever. So anyway, it's a good time for that. So, but that's not actually our subject tonight. I just couldn't let that go by because it's coming up, upon us. And the one other last tidbit, I guess, with that is that because the Hebrews had to leave Egypt so quickly after that as the last plague was occurring, that they just took off. And the story is they didn't have time to even let their bread rise. So traditionally now at Passover, Jews eat unleavened bread, a flat bread, more like crackers almost. They're usually called matzah. But in the New Testament, because they continue to celebrate that tradition and festival in the time of Jesus and up through today, some of his apostles asked Yeshua at one point about that, and he said that the yeast that was important to get rid of in your home was the yeast that puffed you up and made you feel like something special or superior to others. That what we might refer to as the ego or something along those lines, and that inflated, way out of proportion self-importance and self-obsession, that's what we should be purging from ourselves in this season. So ritualistically, we clean our homes of that, not allowing bread or anything with yeast in it. But inwardly, hopefully, we work on purifying ourselves in that process. So, okay, so moving on to what we are going to talk about tonight. Hang on one second. So this is one of my favorite authors is Ralph Waldo Emerson, and probably you all know of him. He was one of the founders of what became called the Transcendentalist group. This was way before Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, back in the mid 1800s, and through the Civil War era, actually. Louisa May Alcott, Walt Whitman, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who went by the name Waldo, Henry David Thoreau, who was a very close friend of Emerson's and his whole family, took care of Emerson's family, actually, when Emerson was doing his extensive traveling and lecturing. Anyway, all these people and others formed this club because they studied basically Hinduism and the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, and along with their own understanding and own spiritual orientation and experience, and kind of had an eclectic expanded awareness of how God, the Spirit, we work, what the nature of that is, and wrote a lot about it. Emerson, who at one time was a minister, Unitarian minister, was probably the most prolific of the writers and lecturers. Back in the mid 1800s, he was such a popular speaker and traveled so much speaking that from his journals, they have discovered that he earned on average, a kind of an average speaking year for him, brought him an income of $90,000 in the 1860s. So you can imagine what that would be worth now. So he was well off in that era of his life. Anyway, so and he writes about many things. Plus, they've now published his journals, which he kept for years. But he writes about the soul. He writes about the nature of friendship, the nature of nature, the nature of God. A lot of spiritually oriented topics, and this is just a smattering of things, mostly from his essays. And most of his work are essays. They're called Essay on Friendship, Essay on the Oversoul, Essay on Nature, whatever. Most of these are taken from those, and a couple of them are taken from his private journals, which are now published. So, start with this one. It is not the length of life, but the depth of it that matters. We seem to always be getting ready to live, but never living. So, if there's anything in that that speaks to you, you can just let that sink in for a moment. It is not the length of life, but the depth of it that matters. We seem to always be getting ready to live, but never living. This next one is, write it on your heart that every day is the best day of the year. He is rich who owns today, and no one owns the day who allows it to be invaded with fret and anxiety. Finish every day and be done with it. You did what you could. Undoubtedly, some blunders and absurdities crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. Begin it well and serenely, with too high a spirit to be encumbered by any old nonsense. This new day is far too precious and far too dear, with its hopes and possibilities and invitations, to waste a single moment on the yesterdays. So again, for those of us who find ourselves getting caught up in regretting the past and the pain of the past, and the past was better and we wish we still had it, in the anxiety that we let our cares bring upon us, our worries about the future, all those things. I mean, you're familiar with them. I think this is a great paragraph. Okay. And you can find these online, by the way. And if you can't and want them, just email me. I'll send you this. Here's the next one. There's 5 altogether. This is the third one. What lies behind you and what lies in front of you pale in comparison to what lies inside of you. Dare to live the life you have dreamed for yourself. Go forward, take action, and make your dreams come true. The power which resides in a person is new in all of nature, and none but he knows what he can do, nor does he know it until he tries. So that's another one we're just going to sit with for a moment and let that come in. This one is the fourth one. It's a bit longer. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is a great accomplishment. Don't waste your energy in rejection. Don't even bark against all that is bad, but learn to chant the beauty of what is good. Is it so terrible to be misunderstood by the world? Pythagoras was misunderstood. Socrates was misunderstood. Jesus was misunderstood, and Luther, and Copernicus, and Galileo, and Newton, and every wise or pure spirit that has ever graced this world and taken flesh. To be great is to be misunderstood. Learn to be yourself, and not an imitator of another. But when I say be yourself, be your best self. There is something that you can do better than any other. Listen to your inner voice and bravely obey it. Do the things that you love. Do that at which you are great. Stop trying to do what you were never made for. For some of us, that's also, I think, a very pertinent one. So let's sit with that for a moment. The fifth one, and last one for tonight. To laugh often and much. To win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children. To earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends. To always appreciate beauty and truth. To find the best in others. To leave this world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or even a redeemed social condition. To know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. That is to have succeeded. So, with all of these, and hopefully you found some meaning in some of them, one of the reasons that I have found Emerson so meaningful is that when I read his things, they really stir something in my heart, and they remind me of things that I've known for a long time and maybe neglected or forgotten or unintentionally put aside for too long. They help awaken me to something that's real and beyond my present limitation, and especially my self-imposed sufferings of one kind or another. So hopefully you find something in that as well. Um, and and to me, all of these are important. One of the reasons I guess I kind of almost unconsciously picked this particular collection is we clearly live in a challenging time, and it's for many of us we tend to be. I know this isn't true of everybody, but for many of us, I think from knowing you that we tend to be kind of sensitive souls, if you will, in that things like meanness and cruelty and unwarranted hostility and hatred and violence, they're not just unpleasant or frightening, which they are, but they're they're deeply troubling in the sense that we don't get it. You know, we might understand getting angry. We might understand saying something in a hot temper that we regret later, those kinds of things. We might understand somebody being despondent because they have such a tough road to hoe right now. But the sheer meanness and viciousness that is really hard not to see right now because of the 24/7 medias in which we're immersed, even if we don't really want to be, the social, the news, the political, all the media. Um, it's so hard not to see, hear, or be affected by any of that. And so much of that prominently displays these horrors going on that it's difficult sometimes to feel like we can make any inroads into improving that. And so I think some of these things about um, listening to your heart, that today's the best day, that every day is an opportunity, that we can let go of the past traumas, that we can find something in us that's strong and worthwhile, that gives our life direction and meaning, that we can actualize those things that we find in us, that we can see the good in one another and support that, that we can find kind of our unique calling, if you will, and in the world. Not unique in the sense that we're more superior to somebody, but unique in the sense of, this is me. This is what I do, and this is what's fulfilling to me, and that's going to be different in some way from what's uniquely yours and fulfilling to you, and that your role, if you will, is to do. If you think of a family, for example, even a big family with, say, extended cousins and whatnot, everybody's role is different. The father of the family doesn't have the same role as the grandfather, who doesn't have the same role as the grandmother, or the daughter, or the second cousin. There are all these different facets that we each serve to fill. And that last part about what it really means to succeed, the laughter in there, I think, is very important, especially in light of some of what we see around us in the world these days. But you could pick any area of the world and any era and area of the world, and certainly find plenty of trouble in there in that time and place as well. So the idea of this being able to laugh and enjoy life and have a sense of humor, and the idea of making the world better, not by big transformations in a global or national or political or economic sense, because frankly, most of us here have never had and never will have that power in this lifetime, probably. But the idea of making the world better because one living being has had a better and easier life because you lived. To me, that's an attainable goal, and it's a very worthwhile one, because part of the reason we call what we do one by one is because I really believe in looking at the history of the world and looking at my life and looking at your lives. That's how change happens. Um, you say something, you do something, you demonstrate something that profoundly affects me, and I change because of it, or I do to you, and that then ripples out. Even if it's not our intention for it to ripple out, it ripples out by the nature of things. And so I think um, that's a valuable goal to keep in sight because it's an attainable one, it's a fulfilling one, and it's one that we're clearly capable of. We can certainly make a difference for at least one soul. And the reality is, all of us make a difference for many souls. But if we can keep in mind just improving the life of one, and if we can keep in mind improving the life of the one that's before us in this moment, and then improving the life of the one that's before us in the next moment, to me, that's the hope of the world. As naive as that might be, right or wrong, I really have, I guess this is a personal thing, but I really have, um, sorry to say if this offends anybody, but the truth of my heart is I really have no hope in governments. I have no hope in economies. I have no hope in global movements. They may do some good. They may even work and prove me wrong, but that's not where my hope is. Um, my hope is in the individual, and that there's such beauty and such strength and such depth and such power of God in the individual that is willing to submit to God, that loves God, that is willing to love God's people, meaning all of us. There's such miracles waiting to happen in that I just don't see in the corrupt hand of politic or money or big movements, whether it's big tech movements or big social movements or big anything movements. And I'm not trying to be a political commentator here or a social commentator, but I'm just telling you the truth. If my hope were only in those things, I would be pretty hopeless. But I'm not hopeless because I believe in the power of the person and that spirit that indwells us, and and our ability to change one another and one another's lives through our connection. To me, that's the hope that we have of personally having a better life and a better community. And then by this ripple effect and by this kind of osmosis of how things are transmitted in human consciousness, um, maybe, the world getting better. So that's my take on it, for what that's worth. Which is, it's worth whatever is true in it. It's not worth any more or less than that. So we're going to take a little bit now and go into a period of meditation. And hopefully something I've shared or something Emerson shared has stirred a part of you that is a good part to pay attention to and bring into greater fullness in your awareness and greater fullness in your action, in your speech, and how you live your life. So let's take that and just begin to move our attention more inside to the place where that Holy Spirit dwells in us, where that boundless being, whether we call it God or spirit or life or whatever the word we use is, where that boundlessness of pure loving being, where that boundless spirit actually connects with our individual soul within us, letting the power of that boundlessness move through our soul and the uniqueness of our soul's expression inform and expand even that boundlessness. And in the place where that tiny spark of our soul and that boundless light of being, where they touch, in that place where there is all and nothing, where there's infinite and finite, everlasting and mortal, life and death, where it all comes into one point. At that point, let us rest. And let us be awake to how all of that is held within us, how it moves within us, how it sustains us, and how it empowers us to fulfill not only the life we've dreamed of, but the life God has dreamed. And let's just sit with that fullness in silence together for a few minutes. So we just slowly begin to bring our attention back once more. When I'm lost and feel afraid, when I need you here, then I turn to those I love and find their voice is yours. When I'm lost and feel afraid, when I need you here, then I turn to those I love and find their voice is yours. So, as we approach this week of Passover, and having already gone through the Easter week before, which is usually the other way around, usually Passover then Easter. Sometimes they're real close, sometimes they're kind of reversed. But it's a good time to take a look at what may be going on within you and within your life. And because we all have troubles and we all have joys, but take a look at, how do I want to put this? Take a look at what you are submitting yourself to, that you don't have to. It can take lots of forms. It can take that you have certain emotional patterns within yourself where you feel sorry for yourself, where you feel angry at others, habitually, I mean, not temporarily, as a pattern. You can look at some of those things and decide you don't want to submit yourself to that anymore because it doesn't fix anything and it doesn't even improve anything. It just makes you feel worse. And if there are others around you, certainly doesn't help them any. Speaking of those around you, this might sound contrary to things I talk about a lot, because I think compassion is important for all of us. But at the same time, you may have now or in the past or in your future someone or multiple someones in your life who their life is different than yours, not just in the sense of what they believe and how they live, but their life is different because their life centers around creating emotional distress and drama. creating it for themselves and people around them. That's how they feel alive. They thrive on that. And so if you have, I hope you don't, but if you have such people in your life, and probably you have at some point, maybe you were or are one of those people sometimes, but if there's someone in your life like that, who your boat's going along smoothly down the river, not without any difficulties, but you're managing your boat pretty well, and it's not rocking and it's not leaking, and you have a good boat and you're sailing pretty well. I don't by this mean you should never help people. I don't mean that at all. But I mean if there's somebody chronically in your life who only comes into it when they want to distress you, only comes into it when they want to trouble you with something that bothers them, only come into it when they want you to fix what's wrong with them, and once you do or once you help, you never see them again until the next time. And you also never get a thank you or appreciation or notice any change in their behavior, attitude, or lifestyle. Or they only come into your life when they want money or something. Then they're gone again with no appreciation, no contact, no interest in you whatsoever till the next time. If you have anybody like that, consider in this season not letting them in the next time they show up. And I don't mean if they show up in a healthy state, if they show up where they're actually caring about you, or they show up where something is changing. But if they show up with that same energy of my life is a mess, it's all someone else's fault, and you need to fix it, or make me better, or give me money, or get down in the dumps with me and commiserate about how life is just terrible, I'm suggesting, at least in this Passover season, give yourself a break and don't do it. Don't do it. No thanks. That's not where I want to be. But if you want to step into this place of holiness, of transforming those things in ourselves, of taking positive action steps, of actually apologizing, of actually taking responsibility, of actually being different, I'll be here. But the old song of woe, that's your favorite song to sing, I'm not singing it with you anymore. And maybe just try that at Passover, if anyone is in your life like that, and see how you feel doing that. And chances are it's going to go a little bit against the grain because most of us here are caregivers. Most of us here want to help everybody. But probably at some point you've recognized you can't. And there are people that pretend to want help but don't. They don't want to change. They want to inflict their misery on you. That's not the same. That's not the same as you helping them carry something difficult. It's not the same as them needing help. It's not the same. So I'm suggesting stop inflicting upon yourself with your chronic negative habits that you know by now don't work for you and make you miserable to no end. And stop being inflicted upon by those who just want to make you miserable because they're miserable. I'm suggesting we just stop that. So, if nothing else, just do it for the Passover week as a gift to yourself, as a gift of staying buoyant, staying healthy, and enjoying the life you have. There'll be enough trouble that comes to it. Don't let uninvited trouble that is not yours and that you are unable to help, don't take it on. So, for what that's worth, and again, it's worth whatever might be true in it for you, and nothing less and nothing more. So, thank you for sharing this hour with me. I really appreciate it. And as you all probably know, if you find anything in any of my teaching that distresses you, sit with it for a moment and go, does it distress me because there's something here I need to look at and work on? Or does it distress me because he's way off the mark and I should just leave it alone? And if it's the second, then leave it alone and walk away and go, he's off track tonight. But if it isn't that, then take it in and work with it. And if I share something, God willing, that inspires you, encourages you, or uplifts you, and helps you to move forward, definitely please take that, as I try to do with what all of you share with me. So thank you for the gift of your community and your friendship and your kind attention. May this be a week of greater freedom and greater blessing and greater wholeness for all of us this week. And may it be so for anyone who is seeking that in their life. Thank you all. I'm going to end the recording for now. We'll see some of you around here and some of you again next week, hopefully at the inner hour. God bless. Bye for now.